So today we're going to talk about policies and procedures at Georgian for co-op and internship. And these are the questions everyone has about co-op and internship. What is a co-op? What is not a co-op? Just how do I get that credit? And what happens if I blow it? As co-op consultants, we get asked some variation of these questions on a daily basis. All of this information can be found in the Georgian College Co-op Student Manual of Responsibilities and Procedures. We'll address all of these topics in this lesson and hopefully answer most of your questions along the way. If you need more information, you can always refer to the manual. It's available to you at any time on Blackboard. You should check it out anyway to be sure you have a good understanding of the basic principles. Besides, we're going to test you on it. Employers, students, and the college all have a responsibility they must live up to if the co-op process is going to work. You need to know what your responsibilities are in order to ensure you're meeting them. Equally importantly, you need to know what the college and your employer are responsible for in order to protect yourself. Each party must agree to these responsibilities, and you'll notice on page 6 of the student manual that there is an outline of these ethical responsibilities. As a student, you really should be aware of all of these. This is a really important slide because it starts to talk a little bit about the eligibility requirements for your co-op and your internship. While co-op is a mandatory part of your program, you must be eligible in order to participate. This screen outlines the overall eligibility requirements, although there may be some differences depending on your program. Failure to meet any of these requirements will result in your inability to achieve your co-op or internship credit. Exceptions may be made under special circumstances at the discretion of your co-op consultant and manager. These policies are expanded on in the co-op student manual. International students have additional eligibility requirements and should refer to the co-op student manual and their international co-op consultant. To be eligible to participate in a co-op education or internship program, you're required to, number 1, register for your classes on Banner and attend 75% of them, as well as completing the required assignments. You must complete a Ministry of Labor WorkSmart campus online course with a minimum grade of 70%. You must verify and maintain a profile on Orbis, including a current resume and cover letter. You must maintain a satisfactory academic performance, and this is one of those ones that may differ depending on what program you're in, so you're going to want to be familiar with what the requirements of your specific program are. You must register for each work term on Banner by the required dates, and you must submit your required documentation to the co-op consultant within the designated time frames. And don't worry, we'll be reminding you of all of these things as we go along through the process. So let's talk money for a few minutes. What do your co-op fees pay for? While we work hard on your behalf here at Georgian, we can't guarantee a co-op placement. As you can imagine, there are many things which are outside our control: student behavior and qualifications, employer requirements, and economic conditions. We obviously cannot force an employer to take a particular student. Your co-op fee does not pay for a placement. Rather, it's a fee for services provided before, during, and after each work experience. At the post-secondary level, the co-op job search is a real-world experience. You'll be competing for positions with your classmates and often students from other institutions. The more you put into your own job search, the more successful you will be. You should also be aware there are repercussions for ignoring policies and procedures. I just want to talk for a minute about late fees. They do sometimes apply to some students, and hopefully you won't be one of them. As you can see here, the late fees can add up pretty quickly if you did not adhere to the deadlines. There are deadlines for registering on Banner, for submitting your learning agreement, for submitting the employer evaluation and report at the end of your co-op. You want to familiarize yourself with all of these deadlines. They will be communicated to you and you will be reminded often. For a full and up-to-date list of all the deadlines, you can check the student manual for the student activity calendar, which is an appendix at the end of the manual. There are policies to follow before, during, and after your work term. This is what you have to do prior to starting your co-op or internship. Remember, there are late fees attached to some of these requirements. Do you remember which ones? Once you have secured your job, you will not be eligible to apply for any more positions or attend any more interviews. You are committed. So what are some of the things you need to do before you start? You need to complete your co-op class requirements. Remember, you have to attend at least 75% of all classes and participate in the online modules. You need to complete WorkSmart Campus with a 70% minimum average. You should be starting on WorkSmart Campus in the semesters prior to going out on your work term. You can start this program anytime, and because it's an online course, you can start and stop and do it at your leisure. A lot of students choose to do WorkSmart Campus during one of the reading weeks or over the Christmas break. Learn to use Orbis. Upload your resume and use Orbis to apply for jobs. Follow the Orbis policies to ensure access. There will be online and in-class sessions to help you learn how to use Orbis. It's very user-friendly, and you should go on and check it out anytime. Ensure you follow any guidelines for interviews. There are specific guidelines around showing up for interviews, being able to qualify to have an interview, and post-interview policies as well. You should be conducting your own independent job search. And once you have your job, make sure you're registered on Banner for your work term and that you've submitted your work integrated learning agreement. So we talked a little bit about what to do prior to starting your co-op. What happens while you're working? Well, it's easy to forget you're a student, but you still are. This process is all about learning, and you are still governed by Georgian's policies and procedures. Your attitude is important, and you are an ambassador to the college. We will be checking in with you to see how things are going, but if you need to contact us for any reason, don't wait. Remember, you can't quit a co-op or get fired if you want that credit, so if something is going wrong, make sure you get in touch. If you're laid off for any reason, or if there's a strike, your hours will still count. We won't disadvantage a student for things that are beyond your control. So what are some things to remember while you're working? Be an exemplary employee. Remember, this is basically a 4-month-long job interview. You will be monitored. A co-op consultant will contact you and your supervisor, either in person, by phone, or by email. If any problems arise, you must contact your co-op consultant. Quitting or being fired constitutes an unsuccessful on your transcript. You must complete the hours required by your program. These will vary depending on which program you're in and which co-op term you're in. Some are 4 months, some are 8 months, some are counted by days, some are counted by hours. So please make sure that you understand all of that. Remember, if you have made an agreement with your employer to work to a certain date, you must honor that, not just abide by the minimum standards of the college. So we talked a little bit about what happens before the work term. Then we talked about what happens during the work term, and now we're going to talk about what happens after the work term is over, because the process isn't complete when you return to the college. After the work term, when you come back for your next academic semester, it's often a very hectic time. So remember to check to ensure you understand exactly what is due and when. The manual is a great tool for this, and you'll also be reminded by your co-op consultant. Generally, all paperwork is due by the end of the first month back. You will not get your credit until all requirements are met. So when you return, you may be required to attend a debriefing session, which will be held by your co-op consultant. And at that session, your consultant will go over what paperwork is due and when. They'll give you the exact dates. As well, you'll have an opportunity to provide your feedback. This feedback is really important. It allows us to report back to faculty as well as employers about how things went for our students when they were out on their co-op work terms. It also helps us improve the co-op process as we move forward. By the deadline, you'll be required to submit your work experience report, your employer evaluation, and one thing to remember about the employer evaluation is that you're responsible for bringing it back to the college with you. Do not leave it with the employer and expect them to send it in. If you don't bring it back with you, you can't get your mark. As well, you are also going to have to submit any other documentation that might be required by your program. Some requirements have additional requirements in terms of documentation. Remember, deadlines are all documented in the manual, and you can always ask your consultant to be sure. So what is a co-op? This is something we get asked all the time. People come to us with jobs and say, oh, will this work? Will that work? Hopefully this policy will help guide you through that process, and you'll be able to figure out on your own what might work or what might not work. A good way to determine if a job will qualify for co-op or internship is to review your learning outcomes. These are all on Blackboard, and you have access to them at any time. If the job will allow you to achieve the required number of learning outcomes, then odds are it will qualify for co-op. In order to accommodate the reality of life, there is some flexibility with regard to the elements you see here. If you meet your learning outcomes but need a bit of flexibility in how you do your work term, see your co-op consultant before you start to get prior approval. It's important to remember that the work that you do must be related to your program, and typically it is full-time, paid, and lasts the duration of your work term. It might also be with prior approval, working in your family business, self-employment, part-time work under certain circumstances, or unpaid work where permitted by policies or where required by some sort of program that you might be, sponsorship program that you might be in college and being subsidized by. You may also do international or out-of-province work, and there's also an allowance for commission-based work. Again, any of these bullet points you see here, if the job that you're pursuing falls under any of these, then you're going to want to get prior approval from the co-op consultant. What's not a co-op? This is equally important. Work experience that is not program specific, does not enable a student to meet specific program learning outcomes and required hours, and has not been approved by a consultant is not eligible to be assessed as a work term. That's really important to remember. So when in doubt, ask or refer to the manual. There are many other things that are also covered in the student manual. Many of these things are going to give you a good reason to go in and check it out, make sure you're familiar with the manual, with the policies and procedures, and that you have a really good understanding of some of these things that might arise while you're here at the college. For example, sometimes students move between full-time and part-time enrollment, and there are repercussions to this. Co-op consultants are often required to consult with various agencies and employers regarding students. In order for us to be able to do this, you need to review the Freedom of Information policy in the manual and click Yes on Orbis when it asks for your Freedom of Information approval. Every program has a different academic and work term sequence. What happens if you cannot conform to yours? Some students come into the college with previous related experience. Perhaps you're one of them and you want to know if you can get credit for it. Check in the manual. Some employers require criminal record checks. We have a policy on that too. For those doing unpaid work terms, there is WSIB coverage. It ensures you and the employer are protected in the event of injury. It's a very critical document and you need to be aware of it. All of these things are covered in the student manual. Take a read through it, then complete the quiz that we've attached below in this lesson.